So this is Chloe Cooper, and she's the Director of Outreach for Aged Out, and she's a member of Action Ohio. And this is how I met her, as a coordinator and peer mentor for the Scholar Network, which is at Columbus State Community College. And Chloe, I've really enjoyed seeing you in action with that work. You definitely are beloved in that community. But and then also, so I may mention that you're now a researcher for the Office of Child Welfare Transformation, which I just found out. So it's kind of cool that I wanted to highlight that as a key kind of resource that we have in Ohio, and now to know that you're on board with them. So I would like to pause there and allow you to share your thoughts on kind of what you see as some of the ways that we can really move forward in this space.
Absolutely. Good morning. Again, yeah, my name is Chloe Cooper, and I'm a member of Action Ohio, the Director of Outreach for Aged Out, as well as, you know, some of the things that Kim had spoke about. And I'm really just here today to really speak on just outlining of policies and programmatic changes that are really important to me as a former foster youth. And the things that I'm going to be speaking about today are really a collaborative effort of former foster youth all over the state. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is actually available on the website fosteractionohio.org. So if you have you know, any additional questions or anything like that, that's also available on our website. But I wanted to offer some thanks and appreciation to the Children's Defense Fund, really for their human-centered design and their initiative to include youth voice in their work. It's really important. I'm just really happy to be able to be a part of this. So today, what I'm going to be talking about a variety of different things. Number one being the Fostering Stable Housing Opportunities Coalition, and more specifically, the Fostering Youth Independence Program. And I did just want to take a moment to offer some gratitude to the Housing and Urban Development Secretary, Ben Carson, and his staff for really making that program possible. I'm also going to be talking about establishing or hoping to establish a foster care ombudsman in the state of Ohio, and really housing that in the Ohio Attorney General's office. And I'll go into more specifics about why that's important as well. And I'm also going to be speaking briefly about really extending the moratorium for aging out youth in Ohio, and how that relates to the unemployment rate. Next slide. So some of you may be wondering, what is the Fostering Youth Independence Program? So FYI stands for the Foster Youth Independence Program. And this program provides on-demand housing vouchers to public housing authorities to prevent or end homelessness among young adults under the age of 25 with a history of foster care. So this could include foster family homes, foster homes of relatives, so maybe like a kinship care, group homes, emergency shelters, and also residential facilities. So within this program, a PCWA, or a public child welfare agency, must certify that a youth is at least 18 years old and not more than 24 years old. So making sure that they haven't reached their 25th birthday, and that he or she has left foster care at age 16 or older, or will leave foster care within 90 days in accordance with a transition plan, and that they may be at risk for homelessness or are homeless. Next slide. So just to give you a little bit of background information about what the FSHO Coalition and the Foster Youth Independence Program is. So since 2013, the FSHO Coalition, which is actually led by Action Ohio, has worked in partnership with the National Center for Housing and Child Welfare, elected officials, including foster youth champions, Representatives Turner and Bass, and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to design a way to weave together existing federal programs in order to eliminate the gaps through which foster youth fall into homelessness. So the FSHO Coalition discovered that the best way to eliminate gaps is to synchronize existing programs such as HUD's Family Unification program with the predictable nature of emancipation. So that would be the date that a young person leaves state custody. So FYI really allows all public housing authorities to provide an on-demand FUP voucher that is timed with a young person's emancipation from foster care. So in this way, existing federal resources can really be knitted together and used as a platform for economic success. And as you can see in this slide here, this is just a little bit of a graphic kind of condensing things of what it might take to bring a national resource to your area. So again, this program requires a local partnership between the Public Child Welfare Agency and the Public Housing Authority. So first they would really need to meet and establish a point of contact and sign an MOU or letter of agreement. And then they would just really need to stay in contact and nurture that program. And as I mentioned before, on the fostering, on our website, there's going to be a sample MOU, and that's provided in both PDF and MS Word formats. And all of these resources are provided so that you would be able to, take these things to a meeting to really discuss this initiative. There's frequently asked questions as well as a detailed briefing paper from the Housing of Urban Development as well. Next slide. So I wanted to take a moment and just talk about how this program differs from FUP. And if you can see here in this graphic on the slide, this gives a little bit of information about the number of youth that had aged out in Ohio in 2019. And it's color coded to kind of give you a glimpse of what programs are available. So, if you can see here in Franklin County, right? So in 2019, 183 youth aged out of care there. With FUP being available in that area. So the Family Unification Program vouchers are for youth that are only administered by certain public housing authorities throughout the nation. So the timing of when these vouchers arrive doesn't always match the timing of youth in need. So that's kind of a common issue with this. But fortunately, FYI allows every public housing authority in the nation to administer the program, and these youth vouchers can be issued on demand because they come from a tenant protection fund. And these vouchers from this account can be issued on demand at the direction of the HUD secretary. That's a really cool component of this particular program. So moving into really how you can nurture a relationship, so helping public child welfare agencies maximize the success of an FYI program. And again, there's a little bit of a graphic here. I'm just kind of condensing that information. It's also available on the Action Ohio website. So child welfare representatives can really maximize results. Number one, by using a variety of independent living funding sources to prepare young people who are likely to transition from foster care into adulthood, such as Chafee and workforce funds. So as young people move along this continuum of services, public child welfare agency staff should really monitor if a young person is at risk of homelessness and interested in the stability of renting their own apartment. If it's the case that a young person will not be able to afford rent in an apartment without a government subsidy, then the public child welfare agency staff would notify their peer at the public housing authority about 3 to 6 months prior to emancipation. So in most states, this is just before 21, that a young person is eligible for and interested in an FYI voucher. So PCWA should also begin to forecast and predict how many young people will need vouchers within their caseload so that they can request vouchers in batches from their public housing authority. And moving on to the next slide, this is a graphic that was created by the brilliant Ruth White. She is the executive director of the National Center for Housing and Child Welfare. And what this graphic really shows is kind of like a timeline of how already existing resources should be utilized, and then how that could move into the FYI. So if you can see at the top here, just in like that orange bracket, the funding sources are these are going to be funding sources, child welfare funds, state, local, housing of urban development funds, and if you can see here, probably from about age 16 to about age 18, this is when, youth are going to be in traditional foster care home placements. Maybe they're in group homes or independent living homes. And then as we work into from 18 to 21, this is going to be where that continued child welfare system involvement is going to be taking place. So Chafee independent living assistance can be used to really enhance these efforts as well, from ages 18 to 23, to really help them achieve self-sufficiency through supports that connect them to employment and education, housing, and other services. And Kim touched on that as well, about really what those Chafee funds can be utilized for. And they can also be used for, first month's rent, like a security deposit, moving costs, landlord recruitment, and things like that. So then moving then into, from like age 21 to age 23, again, with that Chafee independent living program as well. And then from 21 then to 25, the funding sources are going to be then from like maybe a housing choice voucher, or maybe like an overlay from Chafee through age 23. And then moving into that age 25 range is when you would make that transition into like a private apartment. Maybe you have a roommate or other subsidy and things like that. So moving on to the next slide, I really wanted to focus today and speak about the need for an ombudsman's office here in Ohio, and really here's why. So an ombudsman acts as an independent forum for the investigation and resolution of complaints made by or on behalf of the youth themselves, and then that person could make an appropriate referral. So youth who are experiencing abuse in their biological, foster, adoptive, kinship, respite, residential, and group home placements could contact their office, and their concern would be independently investigated. Next slide. So some of you may be wondering what services are offered by a foster care ombudsman. So this office would maintain a toll-free telephone number, which foster children and teens may call from anywhere in the state with questions about their rights, their care and their well-being, issues with their placements, or services received while in foster care. This office would also listen to complaints. They would document concerns. They would gather all relevant information. They would also remain neutral and impartial and provide information on how to help. So for example, there's really an unfortunate trend of young adults not being prepared for independent living. I can speak from personal experience how really unprepared I was for young adulthood when I aged out of care, and for that I ended up homeless. So Ohio foster youth and alumni really recommend that independent living departments should be mandated in every county. B, foster parents and caseworkers that serve teens should be mandated to attend training on resources to assist in the transition to young adulthood. And C, that these mandated independent living trainings should be designed by former foster youth with insights from today's foster youth, included in that curriculum design. So an ombudsman in the state of Ohio would really act as someone who could take report of those services not being offered and inform youth of their rights and how to access what they need. So I just wanted to touch on some examples of ombudsman offices in other states and some things that worked and maybe some things that didn't. So number one, California's state ombudsman for the foster care program. It was created in 1998 with the passage of Senate Bill 933. It's in chapter 311 on page 90. So this bill would really require the state, the office of the state foster care ombudsman to be established in the State Department of Social Services with prescribed powers and duties. And this was something that was a little bit concerning. And there were some of that being voiced that how it would be effective to execute this role, and voicing some concerns about them needing some more authority and independence from that particular social services department. And number two, the Oregon's Office of Foster Care Ombudsman was created in 2013 with the passage of Senate Bill 123, Section 2, Part 7. So they would have a hotline phone number that is available to the foster child at all times for the purposes of enabling the foster child to make complaints and assert grievances regarding the foster child's care, safety, or well-being. And number three, most recently, Texas's Office of the Ombudsman was created in 2015. It was established by Senate Bill 830. And I'm just a little bit of detailed wording about how this bill maps how Texas really moved forward. And they were able to establish an Office of Consumer Affairs. They were able to employ staff as needed to fulfill the duties of its office. They were able to develop a statewide procedure in order to receive inquiries and complaints from former foster youth, to review and investigate questions and complaints and concerns. So if a complaint filed with the office office alleges the abuse, neglect, or exploitation of a child, they would assist that young person in reporting the allegation and open a case for the duration of the department's investigation of the allegation. So then the issue would then be filed with the department and a final report that contains the office's final determination of a complaint's merit, and really any recommendations or corrective actions to be taken by the department. So just really establishing a secure form of communication with the child or teen who files that complaint with the office in order to ensure that that young person is informed of the results of the office's investigation, which includes whether or not the office was able to substantiate the child's complaint. And this ombudsman's office, again, is something that's really important to me. I've actually given testimony on this topic and did so at the Central Ohio Foster Care Forum to the Children's Services Transformation Advisory Council, and really specified that it be housed in the Ohio Attorney General's office to really make sure that it remains unbiased and productive. I won't go into detail about some of the things that I witnessed and endured while in the custody of Franklin County Children's Services, but I will say what haunts me the most is really the feeling of helplessness I embodied as I really tried to help myself and my sisters in care make it through our lives. So, fearing repercussions, there are really countless incidents that went unreported. And those that were really swept under the rug, or myself and my sisters were severely punished as a result of speaking our truth. With that being said, it's imperative to the wellness of children in care that the state of Ohio have a foster care ombudsman. The mental, emotional, and physical health of children in care will remain at risk if there's no neutral outlet for reports to be made in the event of neglect or abuse. So providing a safeguard and emotional well-being to those whose lives are entrusted to the foster care system will really help prevent mental and physical illness and the number of AWOL children, those of which are at an all-time risk for human trafficking. In addition, I just want to reiterate that it's very important that youth have their own ombudsman's office that would be separate from one that would be caring for foster parents, because the two needs will likely come into conflict and potentially make youth reports futile. Okay. Here. So, sorry, moving on to the next slide. And I'd really also, I wanted to touch before I hand over the mic as well to the Q&A about extending the moratorium set out by Governor DeWine, which would prevent youth from aging out and its correlation to the unemployment rates. So the unemployment rate should really always be considered during the COVID-19 pandemic and afterward when extending the moratorium put out by Governor DeWine, which would prevent youth from aging out of state custody and the Bridges program. In order for young people to be successful, they have to have an opportunity to earn income. For youth who may not have had any prior work experience, jobs can be hard to secure even without a pandemic causing business shutdowns. It's really unrealistic to think that anyone, especially those without familial supports, would be able to take care of their basic needs without a source of income. The pandemic has intensified the unemployment rates for every American, but having trouble finding a job is not a new barrier for foster youth or for former foster youth. Those who age out of the system really need to be set up for self-sustainability, which must include consideration of the unemployment rate and the ability for someone with no prior work experience to secure their employment. The inability of former foster youth to gain employment should always be a major factor in their discharge from care now and always moving forward. And that is it from me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Wow, a lot of information in just a few minutes, and you spoke so eloquently, and I feel like I learned so much. Just echoing the comments that I see in the chat too. That was very informative. Thank you, Chloe. Chloe is phenomenal. Looking forward to, oh, that's before the presentation, but Chloe Cooper is a model of preparation, professionalism, collaboration, and strategic sharing, and I could not possibly agree more. So I'd just like to open up this time for questions, certainly for more feedback for Chloe, for Kim, or myself. So please feel free to utilize the chat feature, the Q&A feature. I can start with a question of my own, and this one's for you, Chloe, if you want to hop back on really quick. And so, you know, you really laid out the need for an ombudsman in Ohio really, really well. And, you know, of course, I can't help but think that, you know, during how helpful this would have been to have already had it during a crisis like COVID-19, in which we're seeing a lot of youth don't have access to the typical mandated reporters in their schools and other facilities. And so, you know, that being said, without this being in place now, is there any kind of hotline or anything that currently exists where youth can reach out to help if they need it?
You know what, Allison, I'm actually not sure. That is not something that I've been informed of. So there may be something that exists, but if it's out there, it's not something that I have knowledge about. So I'm not really sure. I would assume, I guess for me, my focus has been more with those that have aged out of the system. So I haven't had really a lot of direct contact with youth that are still in the system. But I can definitely look into that and be able to follow up with you with an answer, absolutely.
That would be great. Thank you so much. Also, looking at the chat here.
And if it doesn't already exist, I absolutely think it's something that.
Great. Sorry, I think I got some feedback there. Just wanted to note in the chat that Doris with Action Ohio just wanted to share that youth who do exit the statewide Bridges program are also eligible for the FYI program, which is an important piece of feedback. Thank you, Doris. Do we have any questions from anybody who's on the call? Oh, I do see one, Lydia Daniels. Thank you so much. She's from Jewish Family Services and has been hugely supportive with this report. It's nice to see you on the call. She agrees that we absolutely need an ombudsman, and she asks, how can we help with the push to make that happen? So I'm probably going to field this one over to either Chloe or Kim.
Well, I think first and foremost, really advocating for it, you know, being able to speak on the topic and why it's important. I think for me and a lot of, you know, the youth that I know that really gave their testimony, specifically at the Columbus Forum, you know, kind of reiterated the need for this. You know, we could talk for such a long time about the different experiences that we had that, you know, an ombudsman's office would really have saved us in a lot of different situations. So I think really just continuing to bring up the topic and you know, really kind of support the need for it is a really good step in making sure that that's something that's happening. You know, putting this information in front of those who make those types of decisions and really just kind of advocating to make sure that we have some changes in implementing this office.
Yeah, I would agree. I would like to highlight, you know, we've had a really good response from the state legislators with so we've helped to facilitate the Children's Caucus, which is a convening, so it includes both houses. It also includes, you know, it's bipartisan, so it includes representatives and senators from both sides of the aisle. And I think that way of forming these kinds of collaborations to get things enacted in legislation can really be key. So getting those relationships and being able to really leverage the voices of the youth themselves to talk about those kinds of things. You know, Representative Crawley has introduced a bill that would bring a group of young people as a sort of youth advisory board. We already have a really excellent youth advisory board in Ohio, but this would be specifically designed to give feedback to our state legislature. And so I think those two pieces of really using the opportunity of youth voice to talk to the legislators themselves specifically. You know, and I know that, and I think you mentioned this, the ideal situation would be that this would be housed in the Attorney General's office. So I think if we can create some relationships there to get them on board with it, so that it's not only being kind of prescribed by the legislature, but also kind of being built up from, you know, within the Attorney General's office, for them to really have buy-in for this and see themselves as sort of the protectors of these youth. I think that could really go a long way.
And something too I wanted to mention, you know, it was something that Governor DeWine really, you know, had established when he was campaigning, you know, creating this office, you know, when he was in office. So really kind of, you know, reminding, you know, the people that are in charge of, you know, the promises that they made, and how important it is and why those promises were made to begin with. So Governor DeWine is great. You know, he's a champion for child welfare, and I feel like he always has been. So really just kind of appealing to that and just reminding folks, you know, what it started as and how important it is as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Really insightful, and definitely echoed in the chat here that building relationships with the Ohio AG's office is a really key action step that we can all do to help to push a state ombudsman to actually happen. And so we do have another question here from Jonathan Thomas, turning to the how we can, you know, advance racial equity in the child welfare system. And so let's see, sorry, it keeps going off my screen. Okay, so the question is, having identified that there is a disproportionate amount of Black children entering care, how can we offset that? Or how can we ensure that their time in care is better? As a former foster kid and African American, I know how it was battling for identity within the system. Is there training that could be implemented for that? Also, Chloe mentioned the HERO Act being available up until the age of 26, right? What all does that entail again? Sorry, I didn't hear it all. So let's start with the first question. So how can we ensure that the time for Black children while they're in custody is better? And how can we offset these disproportionate amounts of Black children we see entering custody, which I believe is at 3 times the rate of white children? And we also know that Black children are typically in custody longer, have trouble finding permanency, and also in more restrictive settings more often. So what do you guys think? How can we help to offset this, this disparity?
That's a really great question. And I don't feel like in this space, I feel like I much more would like to hear the perspectives of, you know, the leaders in in our communities of color, because as a person of, you know, a white person of privilege, it's really hard for me to be the person that's like speaking out with any authority on these issues. What I will say is that I see the Family First Prevention Services Act as an opportunity for us to redesign the way we approach issues that families are facing. So, you know, I feel like we just live in a punitive, in many ways, we kind of, our reflex is punitive. So when a family has a problem, you know, and if we come at that problem with a lens of punishment, you know, then the removal of the child becomes sort of a way of dealing with the problem. What I love about Family First Prevention Services as a philosophy is that it comes at the problem as something that can be treated with the right services. So if we have evidence-based and high-quality services that are available to families who are in crisis or who are having, you know, have somehow been identified as being in need, you know, been referred to the child welfare system, and we come at that person with a real trauma-informed perspective and offering them a real clear path to services, and being willing to fund those services without having to have this prerequisite of the child being removed first. So that's kind of the difference is funding typically is only provided after a child has been removed. Whereas what this does is it allows that service to be provided while the child is still with the family. And I know that's not going to be the solution for every family, but I think there's a lot of families out there who just need some intervention to be able to get the services that they need, and I think it has to go beyond just, here's a counselor for you. It has to go to, here are financial resources to help you get on your feet so that you're no longer in this unstable situation. So that's what I would say. We have to recognize as a society that providing a helping hand to families who are struggling with these kinds of things has to go beyond just providing like services, but also financial assistance to get them to a place where they're stable.
Thank you, Kim. And I do want to add on that as well. There's a group of foster care youth and alumni who are currently working behind the scenes to make recommendations regarding this vitally important issue. They have not yet finalized their list of policy recommendations, but in the meantime, foster care alumni Selena Burke shared powerful testimony at the Ohio State House on Tuesday of last week. So I would highly recommend, and Lisa and I have talked about this, Lisa Dixon with Action Ohio, would highly recommend reading over her testimony. It was actually published in mostmetro.com, which is like a regional online magazine. And I'm just gonna quote really briefly from her testimony, and this has been given with her permission. And she says, "I know what it's like to experience extreme poverty, homelessness, and food insecurity, because my mother didn't have access to the mental health resources she needed to help her navigate her trauma. She self-medicated through drug abuse. My mother's trauma became my trauma. I know what it's like to be a foster youth trapped in an overstretched system that is unable to give foster youth the tools they desperately need to establish a successful start to adulthood." So Selena Burke's, I think it's Rentschler is how you pronounce that last name as well. She's an award-winning filmmaker. She's a foster youth advocate. She's a professional public speaker and screenwriter. And again, highly recommend having her participate maybe in a future webinar to really talk in detail about this really vitally important issue.
That's incredibly powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Chloe. And Chloe, just real quickly, just to answer Jonathan's follow-up question here, the HERO Act Chloe mentioned the HERO Act being available up until the age of 26, right? What does that all entail again? I mean, I guess that could be a long answer, but I guess at least verifying, is it up until 26?
Well, so what the HEROES Act does is it increases the amount of funding that is available for education and training vouchers. So those vouchers, which are available to, that's a $5,000 allotment that can be used for education, that can be used up until the age of 26. So if it takes you, I think a lot of people, it takes a lot of people a long time to get through college, especially if you're coming at it, part-time, struggling, if you have kids already, it takes a long time to get through college. And so having that age up to age 26, I think it adds a lot of flexibility for people.
Yeah, and actually I have a personal story in regards to that age extension. I had actually dropped out of school just, trying to take care of myself and, working all these things. And when they extended the age to 26 for those ETV funds, I got a call from one of the workers, and it was literally the best day of my life. Had I not gotten that call, I probably wouldn't even be on this webinar today. I don't know if I'd have been able to go back to school. So yeah, so that's the ETV funds. And Jonathan, I'd love to touch base with you even after this webinar as well, and connect about how to get you in touch with that resource as well.
Great, thank you. And I know we're coming up on time here, so I did just want to point out one other item that we received in the chat that I wanted to see specifically if you have any insights or anything that you would add to this. The person stated, eligibility requirements for bridges leave out emancipated youth most in need of the services. It may be providing financial assistance, but the program is not teaching youth to become self-sufficient. I know that
Yeah.
there are a lot of, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's so imperative, you know. I mean, it's kind of like that saying, you know, if you catch a fish for a man, he'll eat for a day, and if you teach him how to fish, he'll eat for his life, right? So, you know, providing the financial assistance is great, absolutely, but really implementing those independent living skills classes, you know, is going to be imperative to self-sustainability. You know, if you're you know, for example, if somebody's paying your rent, you know, and then all of a sudden they're not, you know, you need to be able to understand, you know, what a lease looks like. You know, how do you put deposits down for even utilities? That was something that was brand new for me. I mean, I didn't, you know, try to turn my electric on and I had to have, you know, $90 to do that. And that was something I was like, what? You know, I would never have even guessed. So really, you know, implementing some of those independent living skills classes, and there's an abundance of them. Jamal Callahan is, you know, I'm a big fan of him. You know, provide some of those services. So really intertwining the financial stability as well as, you know, some preparation for that independent living as well.
Thanks, Chloe. 3 minutes left here. I don't know if we have any more questions that people would like to highlight. Let's give it here an awkward moment, see if anybody raises their hand or anything. But I guess with that, I would just like to, you know, first say thank you to Chloe for an incredible presentation today. Thank you to Kim for all of the information that she relayed to us as well, and also for her partnership in this entire webinar project series. I definitely could not have done this without you. And let's see, and thank you all for joining us on this webinar series. This is the last one, of course, and it was really a pleasure to share our report's findings with you and explore ways in which we can help lift up youth voices in our community and create positive, tangible pathways forward for all youth to flourish into adulthood. We're really committed to continuing the work of elevating youth voice and lived experience, and expertise in the future in our work with CDF-Ohio. That being said, Kim and I certainly welcome any feedback or questions regarding this series or the scope of this work for CDF-Ohio. So as you can see on the screen, our contact information is listed. So any questions or feedback are definitely very much appreciated. And I thank you all for joining us today. Is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off, Kim?
No, I love this, and I hope that we can keep in touch and continue advocating. So we'll be, you know, certainly thinking about what's next in terms of letters and all kinds of things that we can do together. So thank you for joining us, and we'll be in touch.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thanks.